You have to get back in there. I need to know where that thing is. Officer Ingram had returned to find Dr. Winters lying on the ground, breathing heavily and trying to get her wits about her. She had felt touched by that strange idol, even through the memories of the man hunched before her, and she just couldn't seem to get her bearings again. What the hell had that been? How had she been reached out to like that through a memory? She didn't know, but she knew that she didn't want to go back in there again. Not much scared Winter, but that thing had. "I don't have to do anything," she said, looking up at Officer Ingram as he came back and offered her something cold to drink from the commissary. "I told you where it is. My deal is fulfilled as far as I'm concerned." "No," the warden said. "I need this out of my prison. I need it found and secured before it's too late." "Why? Why would you want to possess something like that?" Winters suddenly snapped at him. "Don't you have enough gewgaws and totems and weird little trump cards at your disposal? How could you possibly think you can control something like this in the first place? This is so beyond you that it isn't even within your kin." Ingram had been hovering, and Winter realized that she hadn't even opened the drink he'd brought for her yet. It was Canada Dry, one of her favorites, and as the crisp bubbles flowed into her dry throat, she smacked her lips appreciatively. She thanked the man, his attitude having warmed to her a little, it seemed, but the warden dismissed him with a chop of his hand and told him not to come back until called. As the door closed, he looked at Winter with all his considerable weight behind that stare. "Control it? No, dear sister. I don't want to control it. I want it gone from here. You see, this prison is my personal toy box, but there are many things trapped here that are best left here. I contain them, keep them here for safety, the safety of the community, and something like this could turn them loose on Kashmir and the surrounding area." "Crap!" Winter shouted, letting her feet wobble. "Don't you dare pretend this place is built on altruism. This is a mason jar you keep bugs in, just watching as they kill each other. I've known you since the darkness of the void. Don't pretend your nature has changed in the last 100 years. The warden shrugged. "You think so little of me. There's some truth to what you say, but that doesn't mean our goals aren't on the same track. Some of the terrible things I keep here are to torment the souls of those who put themselves in my web. But some of them are here because they would unmake the world that I inhabit. Do you think I want to return to that smoldering pit any more than you do? What memories would you collect in that little book down there? No, sister. If Stragview falls, then your little den of Kashmir falls as well. And I have to say that I don't like your odds. If my prison is a place to hold dangerous animals, then Kashmir is a rehabilitation facility for damaged minds. What would they do if even a few of my little boogans got loose on the town? Could you protect them from the darkness the way that I do?" Winter wanted to refute him, but she couldn't. He was right. She was no great warrior. Neither was he, but he had done pretty well so far. "Fine, but you have to promise me that you'll destroy this thing once we have it. It's dangerous, brother. Even you know that. If it corrupts one of us, it will never come to that," he assured her. "But in order to be rid of it, I have to know where it is." Winter nodded, looking back at the placid old man sitting on the chair before her. He hadn't moved an inch in the time they'd been talking, and he looked like some grotesque doll. He was breathing, that much was true, but Winter wondered how much longer he'd be doing that, too. She had seen him in his memories as a young man, full of life and energy, but this husk that sat before them was all the more reason for them to destroy this idol. If it could do that to a human, she didn't want to imagine what it could do to someone like her or her brother. She took a seat across from Dreyer and fixed her hands on either side of his head again. She fell back inside like Alice through the looking glass, and as she landed in the dorm once again, she was glad for the little time skip. Nathan knew he was in trouble, but he didn't know what to do about it. In the last week, he had brought every guard who worked this dorm under his sway, and people were starting to take notice. The bruiser who worked inside security on days, Carmichael, had come in with some of his enforcers and started asking questions. Wellerman answered them as best he could, but Wellerman was starting to slip. A lot of his guys were, and that was worrisome. The longer they stayed under the influence of the totem, and Wellerman was working double shifts sometimes just to be here, the less real they became. They were still there, but their personalities, their uniqueness began to filter out. Lance mostly just stood around and did what Dreyer told him to do, but every now and again he would shake his head and look around like he wasn't quite sure what was going on. It happened a lot in the beginning with Wellerman too, but he hadn't come out in quite a while. Dreyer lived in a dorm full of puppets for the most part, and that was starting to weigh on him. Not on his conscience or anything. Dreyer didn't really give two figs about these hard cases. But it was a strain to orchestrate a whole dorm's worth of men every day. Dreyer was getting up at 3 a.m. every day so he could gather his little flock and tell them what they were doing. Okay, listen up. When I give the signal, we all go to chow, eat our food, put our trays in the wash area, and line up outside the chow hall. Then we go back to our dorm when I give the signal again. Every part had to be given exactly, too. A couple of days ago, we had forgotten to tell them to put their trays in the slot, and they had all gotten into some trouble when they tried to take them back to the dorm. Dreyer had managed to put the hoodoo on Sergeant Wise, the guy watching the chow hall that day, but it had been a near thing. After that, Dreyer had started writing things down so he didn't forget them, and was sure to give orders precisely. Go to the rec yard when it's time. You 20 play baseball, you 12 walk the track, you 8 play basketball. The rest of you go sit around and talk and pretend to be socializing. When they call over the loudspeaker, go to your bunks and go to sleep. Day in and day out. That was what his life had become. He should count himself lucky, he thought sometimes. They didn't live in a work squad dorm. Then he'd have to tell 70 men how to do their job every day. Speaking of, he had to start making Wellerman go home. At first, it had been a treat to have the sergeant here for days on end. Wellerman brought them things, told them things, helped them get extra yard time and extra trips to the canteen. But he was getting to be as absent as the rest. Sergeant Carmichael had actually started coming in because of Wellerman. When the sergeant wouldn't answer his radio, he had come to check on him and his TA. He had started to send him home, but Wellerman had insisted that he was fine to stay, and Carmichael had relented. That was good, because whatever power the totem had, Carmichael was immune to it. Dreyer had tried to sway him in the beginning, thinking Carmichael would be the ultimate ally, but the burly yard sergeant had scoffed and asked him what in the hell he thought he had there. You better make that disappear before I do, Dreyer. Next time I come looking for contraband, I better not find you with that either. I got too much going on today to fill out paperwork for taking a necklace, but I'll have all the time in the world if I decide to make it my business. After that, Dreyer had kept it put away. He coughed, and when he looked down, he saw blood again. That was getting worrisome. He didn't dare go to medical with it, but his teeth and hair had been falling out more frequently. His head was hurting too. A lot. There were times when he thought he might be hallucinating voices. The voices never told him anything nice. They never really told him anything at all. The voices sounded more like earthquakes, rumbles from deep in the earth, and the words he did get from them were terrible. He was coughing more too, coughing up red stuff, and he was beginning to really think that it was the totem. He wanted to give it up, he wanted to throw it away, but he didn't dare. He had tried a few weeks ago, and the results had been disastrous. On top of the headaches and the loss of sanity, Dreyer had started hearing things in those rumbles. First it was just a few words, but Now he could understand the rumbling, roaring voices better than he could his own. They wanted him to do things that didn't make a lot of sense, and Nathan wasn't sure how much longer he could take it. So one night, as his minions just stood around and looked at the walls, he slipped the totem off and put it in his locker. He thought that being out of contact with it would stop some of the problems, and as the rumbling voice stopped and the ice pick behind his eyes ebbed, Dryer felt like he might be at peace for the first time in a few weeks. No more voices, no more pain, but as he closed his eyes to enjoy the silence, he was in for a whole new set of problems. The screaming started about a minute after he shut his eyes. It was sudden and absolute. Everyone went from staring and existing to screaming and grabbing their heads. Fights broke out. People began running around, and as Nathan watched from his bunk, all he could think to do was reach for the necklace. As he held it up, all eyes were on him again, and order was suddenly restored. He could hear Wellerman's radio asking just what the hell was going on in his dorm, and he told the officer to give them the all clear and say it was just a momentary misunderstanding. He told everyone to go to bed after that, but as he lay there listening to the rumbles, Dryer wasn't sure how much longer he could take this. "We heard the ruckus the other night. You sure you won't reconsider our offer?" Dryer looked up, as confused by the intrusion as his charges seemed to be all the time. They were on the rec yard again, milling and going about the motions, and as the group approached them, Dryer looked down and coughed. His hand was red again, and the blood was becoming more frequent. "That looks bad," the man with the ponytail said, "but I think you'd get better if you just gave us the totem. Without it around, you wouldn't have to worry anymore." Dryer was quiet for a moment, contemplating as he tried to make his brain cells work, and he knew the man was wondering if he would respond at all. "Why would I do that?" he finally husked out. What good is it to you?" "It isn't me who wants it," the man said, and when he lifted his sleeve, Dryer saw something carved into the skin of his arm. It was red and running, but the words "Jessie" were still very clear. "She tells us what she wants with this power. The power to bring this prison down, and we obey. We are followers of her wisdom and love, and we will see her will done." Dryer realized then that they were no different than him. They were being moved by something much larger than they were, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. "Go away," he said, and the men around him must have heard something in it because they started moving between Dryer and the Ponytail Man. "You won't last much longer," Ponytail said. "We'll have it, one way or another." He left again, and Dryer was forced to come to terms with the fact that the man might be right. "You look like shit, Dryer. Why don't you just tell us what this is all about?" Dryer had to admit that Carmichael was right. He did look like shit. He had 2 teeth left, a small collection of hair that would make Homer Simpson envious, but not many others, and he had shrunk an inch already. He was sitting in his boxer shorts after the 3rd dorm search they'd had that week, and Dryer was honestly tired of all this. When the goon squad came in, the whole dorm had got up as one and just walked to the day room. Dryer had been with them as he strolled listlessly at the back of the line. Carmichael had taken note of him as he passed, and as Dryer watched all their crap being piled beside their beds, he had expected this confrontation and been prepared for what he had to do. "Sure, Sarge. Why don't you take me out of the dorm so we can talk privately?" Carmichael thought about this for a moment, finally nodding as he stepped to the side and let Dryer make his way out. The two had no sooner stepped out of the dorm when the screaming started again. It didn't make Carmichael as worried as Dryer thought it should. "If I tell you, I need protection. I need to be out of this dorm and away from anyone associated with it." His voice sounded husky, like someone getting over pneumonia, but he pressed on as his mind tried to put the pieces together. "I think that can be arranged, as long as what you have to tell me is enough to warrant it." So, Dreyer had spilled the whole sad story for him. He told him how he had found the idol on the rec yard. He told him how he had used it to control people. He told him how it had all been great at first, but now, between the headaches and the lack of sleep, and his body slowly dying, he was ready for it to be over. He just wanted peaceful sleep. He just wanted the rumbles to stop. And he just wanted to not be the puppet master over 70 blank slates for a while. Inside the dorm, he could hear the other members of the goon squad yelling and trying to gain order again. And he doubted he would be alone in medical if that was where he was going. Carmichael reached out a hand. "Give it to me. Give me this thing, and I promise you that I'll put you somewhere quiet where you will never be bothered again." Dreyer almost wept as he slid it off his neck, handing it to Carmichael with trembling fingers. As he did, however, he noticed something high up on the man's arm. It was fresh ink, maybe a year or two old, but he could clearly see familiar words near the start of the man's massive bicep. The ESSE made him think that there was likely a J past the rim of his uniform sleeve, and it took all his limited control to keep his face from giving him away. If Carmichael believed that he had guessed who the sergeant was actually working for, the quiet place he would go to would likely be a hole near the fence line. Someone came out then, yelling for Carmichael to come and help. The sergeant told the officer to take this inmate to medical and get him rehoused in an ISO cell for possible TB. He said he wanted this whole dorm quarantined, and no one was to go in or come out for at least a week. Others were running up now, and as the officer took Dreyer away, he saw Carmichael look at the idol and grin. He knew what he had, and he already knew what he was going to do with it. Winter came up like a diver again, shaking all over as she looked at her brother. It's a sergeant, Carmichael, and he has the idol already." The warden nodded, lifting his radio to call someone. Winter put a hand on his arm and shook her head. "There's something else at play. Some other entity that's taking control of it." The warden cocked his head. "Do tell." "There were other inmates interested in it. They had marks that were similar to the markings Carmichael had. I think it was a name. A woman's name. Jessie," the warden hissed out. "God damn it. What is that bitch up to now?" Do you know her?" Winter asked, straightening her blouse as she followed him out of the room. "Unfortunately, Jessie is someone I haven't thought about in a long time, but she's someone I've been forced to remember very recently. If she's after the idol, then there's no telling what she means to do with it. Whatever it is, it's not good for Stragview, or for Kashmir." He picked up the radio then, asking for a location on Sergeant Carmichael. Dispatch was quiet for a moment, before coming back with an answer that quickened the warden's steps. "He's doing a fence check, sir. His last call-in was near..." A pause. "G-dorm. No, wait. J-dorm. He's checking the..." But the warden swore loudly and dropped the radio as he began to run. "What's wrong?" Winter asked, not sure what was happening. That bitch! He screamed, pushing through the doors and almost bowling over Officer Ingram. "She's playing with things she doesn't understand." "Sir?" Ingram asked, falling in beside him. "Get some men together and come to J-dorm," he shouted. "If you encounter Sergeant Carmichael, I want him taken to the tower. Immediately." "What's going on?" Ingram said. "Is he trying to break someone out or something?" The warden laughed, but there was no joy in it. "Yes, as a matter of fact, he is. And if he manages it, we are all royally fucked." You're still here. Thanks so much for joining us for tonight's spooky tale. If you'd like a little bit more spooky in your life, why not click on one of the videos that appears at the end of our story? Or maybe head on over to one of our playlists where you can get your fill of spooky content. If you like your spooky a little more tactile, I've got a new book that's come out. If you'd like your own copy, there's a link below in the description where you can get your own copy of my spooky book. If you like what you see here on the channel and think you might like to support in a more monetized way, then why not come over to Patreon or become a member on YouTube? Speaking of, let's go ahead and thank our members now. Thanks to Civ Garstad and Unicorn Hollow for being our spooky ghost contributors. Thanks to Saikat, Lee Kendall, Janet, and Chris Kinsella for being our spooky skeleton tier contributors. And of course, thanks to Xaronan, Winter, Tyler Parker, Stephanie Carrington, Sarah ASMR, Hi Stacy, Emily Coltsfoot, and Cinnamon Fox, and Bella Lee for being our ghostly reader tier contributors. Thanks everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. As I said, if you'd like to have your name read out at the end of every episode that I make, and maybe get a little more, come on down to Patreon and sign up, or become a member on YouTube. Ghostly Reader tier contributors get a book anytime I write one, which is usually about twice a year. So, what are you waiting for? Come on down and give it a look. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.